Hello, I'm Tim Montague, and this is CU150, episode 13. Today is June 10th, 2014. I'm joined today by Peter Folk, founder and CEO of Volo Broadband. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So broadband is a buzz. The entire world wants more bandwidth. Welcome to the internet age. And you have been in the internet business since the late 90s. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in internet service and the history of Volo Broadband.
Sure. Well, when I was in college, I was your typical geek. I liked to do stuff on my computer. I was trying to do my homework, things that really I should just be writing out longhand or typing in a simple word processor. I was doing much more involved stuff. And at that time, there were what they called a cyber cafe was really basically a computer lab with a snack machine, and that's not fun to do your work in. But there were these nice cafes like Espresso Royale and things like that, and I enjoyed hanging out in those, but I couldn't do my work in them because even if I brought a laptop, there was no internet connectivity. Then in 1998, Wi-Fi appeared on the scene, and it became clear that that was a really neat idea to try and marry those two, marry a cafe with good ambiance and the wireless internet so that you didn't screw up the ambiance of the cafe, but you still had internet access for the geeks like me. On winter break back in Champaign, I tried setting up a Wi-Fi cafe at Espresso Royale near Cranard on campus. As far as I know, that's the first wireless cafe I'm aware of. And we ran that for several years. At that time, laptops didn't have Wi-Fi built in, so we had to help people install drivers, and we rented the cards out, and that was our business model. We would rent the cards and make money based on that. But over the years, it became clear that we were never going to make money on that because the price of the Wi-Fi kept going down, and the price of the internet was our main cost. It was almost $1,200 a month to have internet at that time for a commercial entity.
So what was the internet service to the cafe? Was that DSL?
So there was no internet service that you could buy as a normal consumer business other than dial-up or T1. So what we did was we bought DSL modems, and we paid the phone company for what's known as a dry pair, which is an alarm circuit, a pair of copper wires that go from building A to building B. And so it went from building A, which was Espresso Royale on campus, to building B, which was Soltech in downtown Champaign. And we put our DSL modems on there and did our own DSL over that circuit.
Okay.
And it was then Soltech that we paid the high cost of bandwidth to.
Yeah, I remember I was living in Silicon Valley in '99 in Sunnyvale, and we got DSL service, and it was a big deal, right, to get commercial residence DSL service.
Yeah, cable had rolled out internet right around that time for residences, but it was not available for businesses at that time. So over the years, it became clear that the way things were going, Wi-Fi would be free in cafes, but it seemed like people were still going to be paying for their internet service. The price point of about $40 a month has been stable for a very long time in internet service. And it seemed to us that we could use the same kind of wireless technology that we've been using in the cafe to also do internet service outside the cafe. That's how we got our start. We were scratching our own itch, as they say in the industry,
right.
Trying to provide ourselves with a lower cost service.
And so you gave up the ghost of being an internet cafe, but you wanted to be an internet service provider. And what was your first business model for being an ISP then?
Well, our first business model for being an ISP was we were not going to discriminate against small businesses. We were going to charge people based on the type of usage they needed instead of who they were. And that was our defining sort of principle, that we were a fair local internet service provider. and so that was how we marketed ourselves, and it's still true today.
And what were you offering?
At that time, we were offering up to about 5 megabits download speed and up to about 3 megabits upload speed. We're still offering that same speed in some areas based on very similar but slightly updated technology for the most part. We actually have some of our original. So another interesting thing about that time period is there weren't the market for devices to do this kind of thing was very small, and it wasn't very conducive to. They were expensive. They were $1,000 per device, and we figured out that we could pretty much build our own and have complete control over the process, and so that's what we did. We ended up building these computers inside military surplus ammunition cans and just deploying them all over Champaign County, and some of those are still operating today at some of our customer sites.
But you were focused on the business community, not on the residential market. Is that right?
No, we were focused on being fair. In other words, not discriminating against someone just because of who they were. Instead, we asked you what you needed and then gave you something based on our cost. Whereas at that time, if you wanted business internet, it would be 3 or 4 times as much as residential internet, and even residential internet was somewhat hard to get at.
Mm-hmm.
So in our fairness, we served areas that weren't otherwise served by cable and DSL, and we didn't charge a premium just because somebody was a business. So we had.
What you called Volo back in this time?
Sorry.
What was the name of the company in the late 90s, early 2000s?
In the late 90s, it was called CoffeeNet with a CAWFEE net. We were looking for something that was easier to pronounce and easier for people to, to know what it was and that kind of thing. And so we ended up with Volo after a party.
Okay.
After a naming party.
So fast forward to the 2010s and now 2014. Tell us about the state of Volo. What are you up to?
Sure. Well, like many people who started in wireless, we had a bit of a rosy vision for what wireless could do. By 2007, we'd figured out that there were some things wireless was great for, which is rural areas where the people weren't that dense, and some things that wireless is not very good for, which is like dense areas, cities, and dense subdivisions and that kind of thing. And so we were looking at fiber at that time, and that was the same time that Urbana was rolling out fiber to all its municipal infrastructure. And so we bid on the contract to do that, and we ended up winning that contract and deploying all the fiber to most of the Urbana municipal buildings. That was our first step into fiber. We also bought a fiber backbone to utilize, and we still use that today. So we jumped pretty much headfirst into fiber in 2007, and have been doing more and more of that each year. We still do wireless for a good segment of our customers, but our focus is primarily on fiber because we can really do some new things in fiber, just like in the late 90s and early 2000s we could do some new things with wireless.
So one of the things that really struck me when we were talking about bandwidth is that coaxial cable, the cable that many of us have coming into our homes, which is basically a fat copper wire with some special shielding around it so the signal can travel a long distance without interference. Have I said that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very good.
And fiber, which is a very thin glass tube, which is hollow and allows light signals to travel down it with very little resistance, so the signal can travel very far without dissipating. And you can get a lot of bandwidth because you can send multiple signals down a single fiber optic cable using something called multiplexing. How does, why did you take that leap into fiber versus coaxial cable, for example, which is a much more established industry?
Well, first of all, we're strong believers that it's not the technology, it's the service. It's not about it's not about the technical features of the service you're delivering. It's more about what you're delivering and what the consumer needs. You can't build it and they will come in the tech industry. You need to make sure that the thing that you're offering is actually something that people want. And so from that perspective, copper and fiber are largely interchangeable. We did fiber because it has a higher headroom and lower maintenance costs. And I think that anybody deploying new infrastructure today would do fiber. The reason they didn't do it 10 years or 20 years ago is that it was very expensive back then. And for some people it is still very expensive, but we've found ways to do it ourselves that basically eliminate most of those costs.
What do you mean by headroom? Because cable has the advantage of being allowed to travel over existing power lines, for example, right? They just tack the cable right up on that infrastructure, attach it to it. Whereas fiber, you've got to dig a whole new infrastructure, put a conduit in the ground.
You could run your fiber cable over in an aerial mode as well. They actually do that most of the time. The Comcast network already has lots of fiber in it. It goes to each neighborhood. They have fiber, and that's all. Most of that is aerial.
Okay.
So it's not the real distinguishing factor is that with coax you go over a shared medium for a certain distance, and then you go to fiber where it's still shared, but it's a faster speed. With coax, there are some technical limitations on what you can do in terms of sending and receiving different speeds of service, and with fiber, those limitations just aren't there. It's with fiber, it's normally a dedicated connection from the consumer to the at least the central node, whereas with coax, it's a shared connection.
So what does this mean for small business owners and consumers? The advent of fiber networks. Here in Champaign-Urbana, we have something called UC2B, which is a backbone, a ring or a couple of rings of fiber around the community, connecting major institutions like the University of Illinois and libraries and other major points of interest. And now there's an initiative, right, to build that fiber out to the premise, whether it's a business, a commercial facility, an industrial facility, or a residential neighborhood. And what does that mean for us?
Well, again, I think it's important to go back to it's not the technology, it's the service. And the important thing is, are they offering a new service over this new technology that changes the market in some way? And to some extent we are. We're now offering gigabit services, and it looks like UC2B is going to be making gigabit services available to its users. And that's to some extent a new technology. It's a different way of accessing. It's not a different way of accessing net, but it's enough faster that it changes the way you do things a little bit. But fundamentally, if the price ends up being high, the adoption will be relatively low, and it won't impact people that much. I think it's always important to look at what is it that people are looking for, and the majority of people are really looking at their bottom line at this point. It's important to have the technology have capability, but quite frankly, coax has a lot of capability that is untapped at this point, as does fiber. So it's really about the service. It happens that we are using fiber as our technology, but that's not the defining feature of our.
See, I would argue that it's really about our wants, needs, and desires. You know, I have cable internet in my home. I have Roku boxes that stream entertainment to my television, and then I have Wi-Fi to our mobile devices and computers, so forth and so on. But the lag time when I'm surfing the internet, whether I'm at the office or at my home, is, in my opinion, completely unacceptable. I'm wasting probably upwards of an hour a day just waiting for information to flow to my screen. So there's a backlog, especially when you then multiply that by 350 million Americans.
Sure.
Right? That's a lot of wasted time and productivity. So aren't we talking about something that is potentially transformative?
I still have to go back to it's the service, not the technology, because the fact that Comcast is delivering that service to you is really their choice. They could invest a little bit more in their coax network. They could provide more bandwidth per user. They could be more careful about their network management and performance management policies. And it's all possible with their existing coax network. There are some things that they can't do with that coax network today, but quite frankly, those things are not what the market is looking for. They can't do gigabit today. They can't do more than about 150 megabits on any reasonable basis. But they can do much faster than they are now, and it's about the service and the company that's delivering that service, not so much the underlying technology, because it's their choice not to upgrade. And
right. And when you say gigabit, let's explain for the listeners exactly what that means. I mean, on a typical broadband connection, whether it's DSL or cable, you're getting what kind of bandwidth versus gigabit?
So your typical DSL or cable connection in this area is between about 6 and 20 megabits. DSL, if you're on a UVerse connection, which I think most people in town are now on a UVerse, or they have the capability of being on UVerse at least if they paid for it, it's still in that range, but it's near the high end of that range. And cable is almost always around 20 megabits now. Gigabit is 1,000, so it's 50 times faster than 20 megabits. That's a lot. But if you look at what cable could be doing, which is 100 megabits, the difference between the 100 megabits that you could be getting from cable if Comcast decided to be a more consumer-oriented company, then and you compare that to the 1,000 megabit theoretical, but more like 250 or 300 megabit that you're getting, that most people get over Gigabit Fiber. It's not that big a difference anymore. And
so you Volo Broadband, though, are now rolling out gigabit over fiber to the premise in Central Illinois. Tell us about that.
Sure.
Why you keep saying it's about the service. What is the service that you're offering?
So the service that we're offering is a low-cost connection that is very high speed with the support of a local company that actually cares about its customers. That's the distinguishing factor. We don't have the technology allows us to equal or exceed the performance of cable, but fundamentally it's our choices to deliver a great service instead of one that just barely makes it okay for you to pay your bill. That's what distinguishes what we're doing.
And what is it that makes a internet service a great service?
First of all, you need to be able to call when you have a question and a problem and have it resolved, and have the person you're talking to able to understand what you're getting at. Number two, it has to work reliably and be fast. And I would say that put those two together, and the cost, it has to be affordable. And put those three together, and you've got a great service. And cable can be great and has been great. It's not right now. We believe that what we're rolling out is great at this time. and it's also one of the lowest cost services for this in the nation. We think it's at a price point that really makes this super fast connectivity affordable for the average person, which is really where we're targeting.
So what can Champaign-Urbana residents look forward to from Volo? We're just about out of time here, but what's coming down the pike for them?
Well, we're in the middle of our first test bed in Champaign-Urbana. We did a town nearby, and we're testing out some areas in Urbana. By the end of the summer, we will be announcing major build out throughout most of town, and it's up in the air how that will mesh with the UCWB efforts. We'll just have to figure that out down the road. Fundamentally, our goal and their goal is to get great connectivity to all the residents of Champaign-Urbana, and we'll, I think, have some great progress on that by the end of the year.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing how that rollout goes. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Peter.
My pleasure. I look forward to seeing it on the site.
This is CU150, episode 13. Today is June 10th. I'm Tim Montague with the Small Business Development Center at the Champaign County EDC. Thank you for watching.